Okay, so this is a little bit more of a general video on splinting, more a little bit about the teaching of learning a new skill, because it's one that we see in CERT skills, we see it in EMT, and we see it in the CPR first aid. And so this would be built into your scenario, and then you would feed off that appropriate rubric for that event. And so I'll do each of those separately, but I'm going to post this to each of the events website page as well, on just some general lessons on how to use a splint properly, and do a little bit more teaching for you guys as we go through this. So with most of these are going to be a closed fracture on your rubrics. I believe on the CPR first aid one it's an open. You should also just double check as to whether or not you need to provide splinting material for your event, or whether that's provided by Montana HOSA. And you'll find that in the Montana HOSA gotta have it list for your event, and in your short sheet guidelines for Montana HOSA, that you can find both of those on your website. If you can't, reach out and I'll help you find those things. So that's just one of the things I want to start with, are different types of splinting materials. This is one of my favorites to use. This is a SAM splint, and you can see I'm kind of bending it. They're traditionally kind of this orange color. I do have some tactical ones that are a gray color as well. And what's nice about these is they have directions on them. So if you get lost and don't know how to use them, there's some different directions on how to use these. And I'm going to show you some different stuff, because you might get, and what's hard with those rubrics is you might get an arm or you might get a leg, and we're going to split things just a little bit differently because of that. So that's why I wanted to kind of do this more technique video on splinting techniques, so that then you can apply this to your rubric and use it properly. So these SAM splints, like I said, I have a couple of different options. I'm going to kind of demo here at the arm first, and then I'll do a leg for you. But they show that you can apply this a couple different ways. So one of the first things that we always want to do with a closed fracture is I might have my partner hold manual inline stabilization. So let's assume that he broke his forearm here. I would have my partner hold that in line, or if my patient's awake, he doesn't quite bend the way I want him to, I might have him hold that in line there against his body, and kind of have a little bit of a splint of that body part, and kind of holding that naturally. From there, I'm going to assess pulse motor sensory, and really just check that I have good circulation, and that we're not getting any of that cut off. So PMS, you'll see that on your rubric a lot of times referred to. So I'm going to check pulses, and I like to check it the right and left side together, because I want to feel if there's a deficit on one side. And if I check one and then the other, that can be hard to feel. So I'm going to go ahead and check both pulses. For motor, I'm looking for motor skills. So something like, can they squeeze at my hands? And then S is sensory, so I'm going to pinch at the back of their hands or something here. And again, doing both to the same time, so they can compare those sensations on both sides. So I'm going to apply manual stabilization or traction. I'm going to check PMS. I might look for some discoloring, modeling in that skin color and things like that, and just kind of note some things. And then the way that this splint works, they show one where you can go this way with that splint and kind of wrap that folded edge around the elbow. That one's not my favorite. I like to do it this way. So I would measure against their good arm. And so this one's a little bit long for me. You can see how that would cut off of my elbow there. So I'm going to shorten this. And again, because this is so foam and a rollable, has like a wire built inside it. Again, it's called a SAM splint, S-A-M, if you're shopping for these. You can kind of just roll this up to the appropriate length. That rolled side, especially if it's a small person and you're rolling a lot, should go down so that it's not this way and they're hyperextended on their wrist when you're doing that. So they're going to hold that, and then I want to form this to their arm. So I don't want to bend this against their broken arm. I'm going to bend it against my arm or bend it against their good arm, but I can get this nice and cupped in a cup pattern and have that wrap around their arm really well. So I can kind of do that and then have them grab back on. And then you're going to use some different ties. So these are just a triangle bandage that I roll up. Again, you may or may not, depending on your event, I believe, be responsible for bringing your own splinting material. And so you're just going to kind of roll this up. And I would have him hold that, and I'd maybe have him hold that against his arm. And then you're going to ask where that break is. We might use moulage, which is like a coloring. But we would say where that break is on there. So you can I'm just going to kind of lay this on top a little bit so you can see it. I should have used my black one, color wise, for you to see a little better. And then I'm just going to tie that above and below the break. And so just sliding that underneath their arm, wherever they're at, you're going to tie this above and below that spot and make sure it's secured. So you're going to probably use 2 to 3 of these, depending on the length of their arm. And then as you finish, again, you can assess pulses, motor, and sensory as you finish that. You might end up putting that arm in an additional sling to hold it there, or those kind of things. But that's kind of the basics of using a SAM splint on an arm piece there. You could also use a SAM splint down here on the legs for a lower leg injury. And for this one, I like to kind of make a stirrup around their foot. So it's going to go on either side of that foot. And again, I want to mold it to their leg. So I can mold it against their other leg and get that shaped properly. And then put it on this leg. And again, I'm going to use my ties to go above and below the brake. So I can go underneath the knee so that I'm not lifting that leg a lot. So again, you're holding manual inline stabilization of that foot. Your partner might be holding that. And then you don't want to be lifting their leg up and down a ton. So slide underneath kind of their kneecap. And you can slide this down. I usually like to prep that before I place this splint so that it comes around on the outside of it when I go to tie it. Again, above and below the brake. And then finish with assessing pulse, motor, and sensory at the same time on both legs. So that's the SAM splint that you can use on arms or legs if you wanted to bring this material with you. You could also bring just boards like this. So this has a soft end that's padded, and then a stiff end that's the actual board. And so ideally I'd like to use 2 of these, 1 on each side, and it go above and below the brake on there. And same thing, I can go above and below the brake with 2 of these on there. If I only had 1, I could also use 1. For CERT skills, I think that you're allowed to use any materials in the room. So rolled up magazines that you might find or things from your scenario that might be in there. You can use, again, along with your ties, however you decided to do that. For a femur brake, you might have some longer ones, some boards like this. Ideally, we might want to use a traction splint in EMT. It's not one of your skills, but these are all for your long bones. Again, avoid moving that joint as much as possible. So laying your cravats, your triangle bandages before you lay down your splinting material can help you come around the outside of that when you go to tie. So that's just some general stuff with your splinting of long bones. Each skill has some slightly unique things. For example, in the first aid, it's an open wound, so we're gonna apply a dressing to that open break and an ice pack and that kind of thing. But just kind of some basic information about different types of splinting materials. Reach out if you have questions. We're happy to help. But SAM splints, boards, magazines, rolled up pillows can all be used. The biggest thing is just making sure that you're checking that skin for circulation and nervous system response with that pulse, motor, sensory, that PMS, both before and after you do the skill, and that you're holding some kind of stabilization while you're getting this set up and having minimal movement to that long bone as you apply it.